river gives no warning. In the Amazon basin, water is not merely a resource, it is a frontier, a territory, and a permanent condition of life. Between the dry season and the floods, entire forests can become a temporary sea. Solid ground appears and disappears for months. Beneath that surface, an anaconda can detect vibrations long before you sense its presence. During periods of low water, a school of piranhas can react within seconds to the slightest chemical trace of blood. And yet, there are peoples who do not cross these rivers by chance. They have called them home for generations. Welcome to Planet Tribes. Today, we enter 5 territories where a miscalculated crossing offers no second chance. From communities with limited contact to others living entirely beyond the margins of the outside world. If you are looking for a rigorous documentary free from sensationalism, stay with us. Because by the time you reach the final river, you will understand why the greatest danger is not always the most visible, and how survival depends on knowing that every movement in the water may attract a predator you will never see coming. We begin in the territory of the smallest anaconda, and in the domain of piranhas, nearly invisible beneath the surface. In the Amazon, danger is not measured in meters. It is measured by what you do not see. We are in the Urubamba River Basin, in the southeastern Peruvian Amazon. Among the tributaries of the Manu lives the Matsigenka people, an estimated population of around 12,000 individuals distributed across communities with varying degrees of contact with the outside world. We are inside Manu National Park, designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987, spanning more than 1.7 million hectares and hosting one of the greatest concentrations of documented biodiversity on Earth. Here, the river is not merely sustenance, it is a barrier. During the rainy season, between November and April, the Manu's level can rise by several meters, completely erasing the fords used in the dry months. Where a stable crossing once existed, a turbid current with an invisible bottom appears. The Matsigenka do not cross by routine. They observe the water's color, the speed of logs carried by the current, and the way the level rises or falls over hours. If the river's behavior is not predictable, they wait. Mistakes cannot be corrected mid-crossing. In urban environments, crossing a river is an invisible act. Infrastructure absorbs the risk. Here, that mediation does not exist. The Matsigenka must assess every crossing as if it were the first, reading signals in the water that determine whether they live or die. In the dry season, when water levels drop, piranhas concentrate in isolated pools and side backwaters. Studies in Andean Amazonian transition zones, such as the Manu, document this pattern. For that reason, there is a clear rule: never clean fish inside the river, and never enter the water with blood on your hands after fishing. Risk is not defined solely by the predator. It emerges from the combination of factors. In Aguajales, swamps dominated by Mauritia flexuosa, and along the edges of dense vegetation, 2 species of anaconda inhabit this territory. The green anaconda, Eunectes marinus, recorded in the Peruvian Amazon with specimens exceeding 6 meters, and the beanie anaconda, Eunectes beniensis, smaller in size, typically measuring between 3 and 4 meters. It is the smallest anaconda we will encounter today. But that does not make it less lethal. Even at this size, a close-range encounter in the water can become critical. And within the Aguajales it frequents, the confined space eliminates any advantage its smaller dimensions might suggest. The Matsigenka do not classify these animals through formal scientific taxonomy. They classify by size and behavior. They know that larger specimens frequent swamps and densely vegetated riverbanks. They know that activity increases at specific times of day, and they know that risk intensifies when someone is alone or in deep water. For them, whether the snake measures 3 meters or 7 is irrelevant. What matters is where it is and when. So-called tapir baths, sites where the Amazonian tapir, one of South America's largest terrestrial mammals, habitually enters the water, are strategic hunting locations, but they are also potential ambush points. Here, size is not the decisive variable. Context is. The Matsigenka diet combines agriculture, fishing, and hunting. Bitter cassava, Manihot esculenta, is processed through grading and pressing to remove its cyanogenic compounds. It is supplemented with plantain, maize, suris, larvae of Rhynchophorus, fish such as boquichico and tucunare, and large game such as tapir. Yet in this territory, every poorly evaluated movement carries an immediate cost. The forest conceals more than predators. It harbors microscopic threats, parasites, bacteria, and vectors capable of turning a simple bite or incidental contact with water into a debilitating illness. Conditions consistently documented throughout this Amazonian region. An organism not adapted to this environment, like that of most of us, would face immediate vulnerability here. The smallest anaconda is now behind us. What follows inhabits waters where errors grant no second chances. A larger predator, and piranhas that never need to cross the river, because the river is their home. Welcome to Yagua territory. We are in the northwestern Peruvian Amazon, in the Loreto region, between the Napo, Putumayo, and the main course of the Amazon River. Here live between 4,000 and 6,000 people, distributed across dispersed communities, surrounded by channels and cochas, still Amazonian lakes formed by ancient river meanders. For them, water is not observed, it is navigated. How does your perception of the environment change when you cannot see where you place your next step? Imagine standing in a cocha with water up to your chest. The bottom is soft, irregular. You cannot see your feet. Visibility beneath the surface does not exceed 20 centimeters. What lies below is not seen, it is inferred. And so they move as if reading an invisible landscape. Heel first, foot sliding before transferring weight. Because beneath the mud, river stingrays may be buried. Their barbed stinger reacts reflexively when stepped on. The wound is deep. The pain is extreme. Complications can develop rapidly. The Yagua call this technique sweeping while walking. It is not habit, it is prevention. When you walk through a puddle on a city street, you do not think about every step. You simply walk. The Yagua must calculate each placement, each weight transfer, knowing that a single misstep may result in severe injury hours away from medical assistance. In the Napo region, medical records document stingray injuries as one of the most frequent causes of serious aquatic accidents. Here, the risk is not hypothetical, but it is not the only one. In dark water cochas, the southern green anaconda, Eunectes marinus, finds its ideal environment: floating vegetation, minimal visibility, and prey moving within the water. Within lake systems and slow side channels of this region, large specimens exceeding 6 meters have been recorded. In large constrictors, the decisive factor is not crushing, but immobilizing and rapidly compromising respiration and circulation when the grip is precise. An anaconda can remain submerged for several minutes without breathing. Its bifurcated tongue and vomeronasal organ allow it to track chemical traces in the water. In a dark cocha, this information becomes critical. Hunting depends less on vision and more on signals the body itself can detect. They do not attack indiscriminately, but risk increases when someone is alone, submerged, and within striking range. The Yagua know which lakes are safe and which are not. In a kocha where an active anaconda is present, the decision is simple. Entry is avoided. Yet when they must enter the water, the Yagua rely on something remarkable. The body becomes a sensor. Subtle shifts in temperature, tension, or bottom resistance may reveal a nearby presence. This is not mystical intuition. It is bodily perception refined through years of experience. The black caiman introduces another variable. Adults exceeding 4 meters inhabit these fluvial systems. Their primary activity is nocturnal. For that reason, nighttime fishing is avoided in zones known for their presence. Darkness prevents the reading of water, and what cannot be read cannot be anticipated. Still water lakes present a different challenge. Here, piranhas are not transient. They inhabit these closed systems permanently, generation after generation. When you enter the water, you are not crossing their territory. You are entering their home. The Yagua have learned that in still waters, the scent of blood does not dissipate with current. It lingers, it concentrates, it remains suspended. Thus, the rule is not merely never clean fish in the water. It is never handle bleeding fish before entering. Because in a kocha, hands carrying the odor of blood are enough. An open wound is unnecessary. The scent can persist on skin for hours. Fishing is carried out with spears, bows, or through barbasco, the extract of the Lonchocarpus niku root, used to temporarily stun fish in confined stretches. The objective is not devastation. It is to take what is needed and leave. The body is a tool. Skin softens after hours of immersion. Wet garments do not dry in a humid climate. Minimal clothing becomes a practical adaptation. The Yagua language, the last surviving member of the Peba Yagua family, contains classifiers that allow precise description of shape and behavior. In an environment where water can conceal everything, naming with accuracy is a form of anticipation. You now understand. The Yagua do not challenge the river. They interpret it from within. We leave behind swamps and still water lakes and move toward a river where presence is defined not by a single species, but by many, and where water imposes a different set of rules. The Xingu is not the Amazon. It is neither wide nor predictable. It is fast, irregular, and it does not forgive mistakes. We are in the Brazilian state of Pará. Here, live between 9,000 and 12,000 Kayapó across a territory exceeding 11 million hectares. Their lives revolve around a river channel that runs over granitic bedrock, forming rapids where water accelerates between blocks of polished stone. Within this fluvial system, a miscalculation cannot be corrected. It carries you away. For the Kayapó, the river is not merely a resource, it is a frontier, a boundary between what can be controlled and what cannot. Its behavior shifts radically with the seasons. During flood periods, stretches that were once calm pools transform into corridors of hydraulic force capable of destabilizing any light vessel. Routes are not memorized. Patterns of transformation are. The pirarucu, one of the highest calorie fish in the basin, demands absolute precision. It surfaces to breathe for only seconds. The harpoon must strike cleanly. Near rapids, a single failure may push the canoe into currents impossible to overcome. When was the last time your survival depended on correctly reading the velocity of a current? Here, the danger is not solely the predator. It is the physics of water. During the dry season, river levels fall, revealing deep pools between the rapids. In these spaces, fish concentrate, and so do piranhas. But these are not the piranhas of still waters or slow rivers. They are piranhas confined between rapids, stretches where the current accelerates violently upon colliding with rock. The Xingu, unlike the slow-flowing Amazon, possesses a dramatic gradient. Rapids convert water into a force capable of sweeping away a canoe in seconds. As levels drop, these rapids function as natural barriers. Between them remain isolated pools, water traps. Confined for months within these pools, competition intensifies. Reactivity to blood or vibrations increases. Behavioral studies of piranhas in fast current systems document that confinement within isolated pools significantly elevates both intra- and interspecific aggression. Density may rise drastically compared with continuous flow rivers. Isolated pools impose a different ecological dynamic. Fish density rises. Competition escalates. Stimuli become amplified. In such an environment, an accidental fall can quickly become life-threatening. Rescue is not debated, it is executed. The Kayapó use long poles, often trunks reaching 4 meters, to extract someone who has fallen. They do not enter the water, ever, because 2 bodies in a pool with territorial piranhas do not improve survival probabilities, they reduce them. An additional body generates more vibration, more movement, more stimulus. For piranhas, this signals escalation, and escalation triggers response. This is the defining difference of the Xingu. Here, geography transforms error into entrapment. When waters retreat after floods, temporary lakes emerge, surrounded by floating vegetation. These zones are biologically highly productive. They are also anaconda habitat. 2 species are present here. The southern green anaconda, Eunectes murinus, with specimens exceeding 6 meters documented in the Brazilian Amazon, and the dark-spotted anaconda, Eunectes de Chauansei, one of the least known and least scientifically documented species of the genus. First described in 1936, this species remains poorly represented in scientific literature. It inhabits primarily northern Brazil, particularly Pará and Amapá. Very few specimens have been studied. It is distinguished by a more defined and circular spot pattern than the green anaconda, and by a slightly smaller average size. Yet in rivers where visibility is limited, differentiation is nearly impossible. For the Kayapó, these snakes are seasonal apparitions. They do not occupy identical zones year-round. They appear when post-flood waters create temporary lakes, typically between February and May, moving with the river itself. Movement here never occurs without probing. Long poles are used to test the substrate before stepping, because what appears solid ground may be floating vegetation above deep water. Water hyacinth, Eichhornia crassipes, and other aquatic plants form dense mats capable of supporting small animals, yet yielding under human weight. Beneath that vegetation, either species may be concealed, but there exists a threat no pole can detect. Illegal mining has introduced mercury into the basin. Studies conducted by the Universidade Federal do Pará have identified elevated levels in indigenous communities, including children, exceeding WHO recommended limits. In certain Kayapó communities, blood mercury concentrations surpass 10 micrograms per liter. The WHO safety threshold is 5 micrograms per liter. In children, reported values are even more concerning, some studies documenting levels up to 15 micrograms per liter. Mercury bioaccumulates along the trophic chain. Carnivorous fish such as tucunare and pirarucu, central to the Kayapó diet, may contain concentrations up to 1,000 times higher than surrounding waters. Mercury is invisible, its effects are not. Neurological consequences include loss of motor coordination, cognitive impairment, and irreversible damage to the central nervous system. In children, developmental delays and permanent learning deficits are documented risks. The Kayapó continue to eat from the same river. But the river itself is no longer exactly the same. They understand every current, every rapid, every seasonal transition. Yet even here, ancestral knowledge has limits. If this journey is helping you understand how survival operates within these rivers, continue with us. We have crossed environments where risk can be perceived. What follows leads into a domain where even knowledge cannot guarantee control. Because the next anaconda was only recently distinguished by science, though the peoples who live alongside it have recognized it for generations. From this point onward, we leave behind the last landscapes that still retain a margin of predictability. There are peoples who live beside the river. The Tikuna live by it. We are in the stretch of the Amazon where Colombia, Peru, and Brazil converge. In this region, river levels may fluctuate by more than 10 meters between the dry season and the rains. During flood months, vast areas of forest become submerged, and all navigable and walkable zones are completely reconfigured. For this reason, Tikuna dwellings are built on stilts, adapted to the Várzea floodplains, alluvial landscapes seasonally inundated by the Amazon. This is not an architectural preference. It is a direct response to hydrological instability. The Tikuna constitute the largest indigenous population in the Brazilian Amazon, with more than 50,000 individuals distributed across Brazil, Colombia, and Peru. In many communities, the canoe is the primary means of transportation. River mobility is not optional. It is daily life. You step out of your home, and movement begins on water. The ground beneath your feet is not fixed terrain, but a shifting boundary governed by the river's annual pulse. Months of high water, months of retreat. What was a path yesterday may be deep water today. This is the Tikuna reality. The same system that enables subsistence concentrates ecological risk. Red-bellied piranhas, Pygocentrus natereri, are a stable component of this ecosystem. During the dry season, as water levels fall and fish become confined within isolated pools, feeding competition intensifies. Under such conditions, schools may react rapidly to stimuli such as blood or erratic movement. Here, risk is not exceptional. It is constant. The absence of documented incidents does not imply absence of danger, but rather a carefully regulated interaction with the environment. Survival depends less on reaction and more on not triggering what remains unseen. The northern green anaconda, Eunectes acayima, inhabits secondary channels and darker waters. This species was formally confirmed by science in 2024 following a combined scientific and documentary expedition in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Until that point, only a single species of green anaconda was recognized. Genetic analyses revealed a striking conclusion. The northern green anaconda is genetically distinct from its southern relative. The genetic divergence is approximately 5.5%, more than double the genetic distance separating humans and chimpanzees, indicating an evolutionary separation of nearly 10 million years. The northern green anaconda inhabits Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad, and French Guiana. It is also present in Tikuna territory in the upper Amazon. The largest specimen documented during the expedition measured 6.3 meters, though local communities describe even larger individuals. It favors slow waters, dense vegetation, and aguajal swamp systems, where ambush becomes nearly undetectable. There are no verified records of recent fatal attacks within these communities, not because the animal is rare, but because its behavior is well understood. For science, this distinction is recent. For the Tikuna, it never was. Fishing remains the axis of subsistence. Species such as Gamitana, Tucunare, and Amazonian catfish are regularly harvested. The Pirarucu, Arapaima gigas, capable of exceeding 2 meters in length, demands precise technique based on its need to surface periodically for air. Harpooning requires vessel stability and coordinated execution. Climatic conditions impose constant physiological pressure, persistent humidity throughout much of the year, and documented malaria presence in sectors of Alto Solimões. Access to medical care may require prolonged river travel. The Tikuna language is tonal, a rare characteristic within the Amazonian region. Variations in vocal pitch alter lexical meaning, reflecting a highly structured and complex linguistic system. The Tikuna relationship with the river is not one of confrontation, but of continuous interpretation. Reading seasonal variation is not knowledge, it is survival. And so far that reading has been sufficient. We have now encountered 4 peoples who understand their anacondas. But there exists a 5th people about whom we know almost nothing, because they determined that the most important knowledge is not how to survive the anaconda, but how to survive us. Within their territory dwell some of the largest anacondas reported in the deep Amazon. Prepare to understand why their land marks the boundary of this journey. There is no road to reach them. There is no door, no entry protocol, no safe way to approach. What there is a river. And on the other side, or at some shifting point along its bank, lives one of the last peoples in voluntary isolation on the planet. This is the territory of the Mashco Piro. We are in the basins of the Las Piedras, Manu, and Purus rivers, in the Peruvian region of Madre de Dios, on the border with Brazil. Their population is estimated between 400 and 600 people, although no figure can be verified. They are nomadic or semi-nomadic. They do not build permanent villages. They move, and that movement is survival. The Las Piedras River is the axis of the territory that the outside world has managed to identify. Turbid, dark brown waters. Visibility below the surface does not exceed 30 centimeters. Here, seeing is not an option. You are standing on the bank of the Las Piedras. The water flows a few meters from you, dense, opaque, impossible to read. You need to cross it. Your family is on the other side, or the food, or the next camp. There is no bridge. There is no motorized boat. There is no life jacket. What you have is a raft of logs tied together with vines, and the knowledge that beneath that murky surface lives one of South America's largest predators. The green anaconda, Eunectes marinus, inhabits these rivers. In the Las Piedras and Manu rivers, sightings of large anacondas are consistently reported, with lengths typically between 6 and 7 meters. Although there are accounts of larger specimens, verified scientific measurements rarely exceed that range. This species favors turbid waters, where reduced visibility maximizes the effectiveness of an ambush. The Las Piedras meets exactly those conditions. For the Mashco Piro, who cross these rivers by swimming or on rudimentary rafts without a keel or rudder, this is not a scientific statistic. It is a permanent condition of life. They cross without being able to see the bottom or confirm what moves beneath the surface. The anaconda could be 3 meters away, motionless on the riverbed, detecting the vibrations of every movement in the water, and there would be no way of knowing until it was too late. They simply cross, because the alternative is to stay where they are, and staying can mean not eating. When you enter the sea and something brushes against your leg, your pulse quickens. What would you do if that feeling were permanent, in water where you can't see 30 centimeters, and that thing brushing against you could be a 7-meter anaconda? That is the life of the Mashco Piro every time they enter the water. The aguaje, fruit of the Mauritia flexuosa palm, grows in flooded terrain, in swampy areas where water stagnates and vegetation becomes dense. These are the aguajales, and the aguajales are the preferred habitat of the green anaconda. The Mashco Piro enter those spaces to harvest aguaje. They walk on terrain where the ground can move, where what seems like solid ground is floating vegetation over deep water. Each step could trigger the response of a predator weighing over 100 kilograms, waiting motionless among the submerged vegetation. The anaconda hunts by ambush. It does not chase, it waits. And in the aguajales, where visibility is zero and the water can be a meter deep hidden under a layer of vegetation, the mistake consists of not knowing you are about to make one. How they manage this exact risk is something no one can describe with certainty, because access to their daily life is extremely limited. But they do it, every season. Because without aguaje, survival becomes complicated. How many generations does it take to perfect a protocol where a single mistake can be fatal? Piranhas are present in all the river systems the Mashco Piro inhabit. During the dry season, when the water level drops dramatically and fish become concentrated in isolated pools, the behavior of piranhas changes. Competition for food becomes extreme. Aggression increases. Under these conditions, a school of piranhas can detect blood in the water from a distance, and the response is immediate. Dozens of individuals converge on the source in seconds, activating a collective response that is difficult to reverse. The Mashco Piro fish in these waters, with bow and arrow from the shore or from minimal structures over the water. Fishing here requires reading the river without seeing it, detecting shadows, minimal shifts on the surface, changes in the current that betray the presence of a school. You don't aim at the fish, you aim at the movement that reveals its presence. It's a skill not learned in an afternoon. It is inherited. And after fishing comes transport, carrying a bleeding fish on a raft, crossing the river with traces of blood on your hands, moving in water where piranhas patrol the pools and backwaters. When you wash a fish bought at the supermarket, you do it under the kitchen tap, with drinking water in a stainless steel sink. The Mashco Piro wash a freshly caught fish on the riverbank, knowing that the blood residue can attract a predator they won't see coming. Every gesture has consequences. Every decision counts. A Mashco Piro crossing the river after fishing must wash their hands on dry land before entering the water. They must keep the caught fish inside the raft, never hanging in the water on a string. They must avoid entering the water with open wounds, no matter how small, during the dry season. These are not abstract cultural norms. They are survival protocols accumulated over generations. Because here, attracting a school of piranhas towards the raft in the middle of a crossing is not an anecdote to be told later. It is a mistake that can capsize the vessel if the response is panic instead of control. But the greatest risk they face does not live in the water. It is a respiratory pathogen for which they have no acquired immunity. Epidemiological models documented in other Amazonian peoples during the 20th century show that a mild infection for an immunized population can kill between 20 and 50% of a population with no prior exposure within weeks. A cold, the flu. This is why isolation is not fear. It is the only defense against an enemy they cannot fight with bows or knowledge of the river. The Las Piedras River is that border. But the real threat does not come from the water, it comes from above. Roads advancing from Madre de Dios, logging and mining concessions. Here, the mistake is not born in the river, it is born outside of it. And we are not the ones who assume the consequences. 5 peoples, 5 rivers, anacondas that don't need to be seen to command respect, piranhas that don't need to measure more than 20 centimeters to turn the water into territory. We have seen the Matsigenka assess every crossing as if it were the first. The Yagua advance through dark oxbow lakes, reading the bottom with their feet. The Kayapó interpret the current of the Xingu as if it were a living text. The Tikuna adapt to the annual pulse of the Amazon, building their lives where the ground disappears for months. And the Mashco Piro maintain distance as their last form of defense. None of this is improvisation. It is accumulated knowledge applied in real time, an adaptation that does not stop. In our daily lives, risk is cushioned. If the river rises, there are alerts. If we get sick, there are hospitals. If the bridge fails, someone repairs it. They do not have that invisible safety net. They rely on observation, on discipline, on experience passed down generation after generation. We measure progress in infrastructure. They measure it in survival. Perhaps the real question is not how they manage to coexist with anacondas and piranhas. Perhaps the question is what we have lost by ceasing to directly read the environment we inhabit. Now we want to know something from you. Which of these peoples impacted you the most? Were you aware of these realities before watching this documentary? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If this journey helped you see nature in a different way, and you believe these communities deserve respect, you can support it with a like and by sharing this documentary. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to continue exploring territories where every decision matters. Because in the Amazon, no journey is definitive, and what we have barely touched upon today is only a part of what still remains hidden. See you on the next journey.